One of our biggest foreign exchange earners, the oil sector, is in decline. It's been in decline for the last 5 years. The Public Interest and Accountability Committee issued a report just last week and is warning once again that there is danger ahead. There's some predicting that very soon, within the decade, if something drastic doesn't happen, we will no longer have an upstream oil industry in Ghana. And that is why we are pausing tonight to look at the PIAC report. They've been warning. Every single PIAC report has been flagging this, but we haven't seen much over the last few years as far as the government intervention. But this government have indicated that they want to reset the sector. And one of their primary objectives is to return the oil and gas sector back to its glory days when it's propelled the economy to the fastest growing economy in the world. Sometime in 2011, it's been declining quite consistently because you're failing to attract investments into the sector. And the attendant problem there is our revenues have been declining also. And this is the picture that you see there on your screens. 5 years continuous decline. And if you look at it, gold is currently shoring up this quite significantly. The world crude prices have dropped, but our particular problem has been complicated by the decline in production primarily. And this has been happening for the last 5 years. We're going to be interrogating this because this has a lot to do with the social investments that government can make. It is critical. The social investment government can make will be significantly hindered and inhibited if there isn't money coming in from the oil revenues. And as you know, this government says they are devoting almost all of the amounts that we get, the revenues we get from oil and gas, to the big push. That is infrastructure, the roads, the schools, etc., that we need to ensure our development continues. So this is very critical to our survival. And yet, we don't know if indeed there is enough attention being paid there. Well, assess the government's own interventions. And as we've seen in my conversations with John Junapo, he's been very clear that the president's objective and stated goal is to revive the upstream sector. It is a primary task that he has been given to reverse this particular trend. And they put in a few measures. He's talking, for example, about changing the fiscal regime that governs the upstream oil sector so that Ghana can become more attractive, so we can attract more investors into the country, right? So why? Falling production volumes is a key. 2, shrinking petroleum revenues is also something that we've seen the evidence of the dying sector. Where, again, when you look at the oil production in the 2025 actual versus 2024 projection, we are projecting 500,000 barrels a day as of 500,000 barrels as of 2024. That was a target. The actual, according to PIAC, we are about 326,000. So that tells you that we are not achieving our targets. We are way short of this target, at least, that was set in 2024. And this has implications, right? And then you look at the production volumes from 2010 to date. You will see that it peaked somewhere in 2019. Again, this is according to the PIAC. It peaked somewhere in 2019, and since then, it's been in a consistent decline from 71.4 million barrels. We're talking now about some 46.3 million barrels. So that is a decline. The evidence is staring us in the face, and something drastic must happen because really all across the coasts of the Atlantic coast, and according to the data that we've seen, countries are discovering fossil fuels and petrocarbons in abundance. Ivory Coast has it. So if you're not competitive, you're going to lose investors to these other countries. And that is why we've had the government say they want to reset. And at the recently ended Africa Oil Week, a 1.5 billion memorandum of intent was signed between Vitol, ENI, and government. Some investments that government is expecting in the next few years to come in, or to show to the world that we're ready for business. And whether that yields results or not, we wait to see. And then you look at the semi-annual report, again, shows a decline. Mid-year, 24.8 million barrels. Now we're talking about some 18 million barrels. So the decline is seen everywhere. And this picture here tells you 25%, 25.8% decline is significant. We're talking about 56% decline if you look at the revenue. Of course, if your production is dwindling at this alarming rate, you can expect that it will hit the bottom line. And if the country is not making enough revenues from oil and gas, your guess is as good as mine. That is government unable to build the school, to construct the roads that we need. Of course, our foreign exchange earnings will dwindle, and that has implications for city stability. There's a whole raft of implications that we really want to avoid. And again, the PIAC report is also hinting at something. Arrears, as far as the Digital Assembly Common Fund is there, but the big push is going to put in some 95% of the petroleum revenues is going to go into infrastructure development. The PIAC report says that is actually a good thing, that we are using the bulk, almost everything from the oil and gas revenues that we get to one thing. So you don't spread it thinly as we've done it in the past. So they endorse this approach that the government is taking, and then the rest will go to the Digital Assembly's Common Fund. Even there, they raise questions about the amount allocated to it. And if you look at the trend of the petroleum revenue over the years, we've not been consistent for many reasons, but primarily dwindling production affects your revenue bottom line. You see the steep drop here, it's still dropping from 2024 to 2025. Something must happen. We must have new petroleum agreements signed. We must have a pipeline of projects coming in. Every oil industry, every country needs that, and that then brings in the spin-off effect is massive for the economy if you look at the impact there. And then you look at the cumulative amounts that we've made from the oil and gas since we started producing in 2010 to date. You're talking about some 11.58 billion. That's a lot. You need to ask yourself, where's the evidence of this? Where do we spend the money? And PIAC is recommending something interesting, that the roads that are going to be built under the big push, because it's coming from the ABFA, we should label them. So my road, right, that is the Adenta Dodowa road. If it's done and they use the oil revenues to do it, that road must be labeled clearly. There must be a big signboard somewhere that says this road, the oil revenues were used to build it. At least people can see and touch it, right? It's tangible, we can feel it. And PIAC is recommending that. How much of a difference would that, for example, make? The PIAC boss is here with me for a conversation today. Now, other things that the PIAC report touched on that I found interesting is one of the things that, in fact, the most important factor for the decline, failure to attract investment, right? New investment into the sector. It's so key. As I said, the competition is very key now. And then you have an energy transition, 2050, that there's a race towards, everybody else is talking about net zero. What it means is that assets are going to be stranded, means the fossil fuels that you have, the petrocarbons that you have in the ground will stay there. Nobody wants to invest in it because it's pretty costly now. And the pool of global funding available for developing and exploiting and producing oil is dwindling because there's a push towards renewables. So you have to do it. You have to do it now. And so we've seen in the PIAC report, PIAC is recommending that government must fund GMPC so they can go in there and become our NOC, right? And they themselves can become an operator. So we can take our destiny into our own hands. So we'll explore that when my guests join me. Falling oil prices also affecting. We've seen the prices oscillating. It's somewhere in the 60s and mid-60s, $65 a barrel there. You're expecting it to go a bit higher, but that also accounts for the revenue shortfalls we've seen. And then, of course, we talk about the weak public engagement on some of the key issues. PIAC is saying government must engage more. This has a lot to do with our pockets, our collective pockets, and our ability as a country to develop. My guests are joining me on the back of the PIAC report to now take a stock and reflect on where we are with our oil and gas industry. Remember, 2010 we started producing oil in commercial quantities. 2025, it's a landmark period to now assess where we are. I believe that is 15 years exactly we're talking about. And that should give us an indication. It's time to assess how we can ensure that we continue to have an oil and gas industry in the next few years. My guest joining me after this. And thanks for staying with us. Your PM Express is always brought to you by Syntax Tanks. It is strong, it is tough. Academic Times and Pepsodent Cavity Fighter. Tonight, you are looking for the tortoise on the tank. That is a sign of quality. It's simple. If your tank doesn't have the tortoise on it, then it is not the correct tank. That's right. The tortoise tank, Syntax Tanks, is the champion of water tanks. It is strong, it is durable, and built to handle Ghanaian weather, rain or shine. Syntax Tank has your back. Syntax Tanks are strong, are tough. An Academic Times journal is launching soon with 3 distinctive graphic publications and a journal to showcase and empower students across all educational levels, while the journal and the tertiary G seeks to ensure that tertiary students' research makes an impact. So look out for it when they launch. And tonight, every time we eat, food and sugars are trapped between our teeth, leading to tooth decay, gum disease, and in some cases, foul breath. Brushing your teeth every morning and night with Pepsodent Cavity Fighter gives your teeth the protection they need, leaving you with 10 times stronger teeth. Pepsodent, every smile matters. The big conversation tonight, looking at the big picture, and joining me in the studio for that is Isaac Jamina. He's the head of Secretariat of the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. So I'm delighted to have him. He heads it, and they put out the report last week, and he can talk to us about it. And to be fair to him, this is not the first time that headline warning has been issued about the decline, but it's continued. I wonder if you've seen any interventions that may slow down the decline. And this has implications for your pocket, as I've explained earlier. And that is why we can speak also to Dr. Theo Champon. He's an economist and political risk analyst. He has a book on the upstream sector, though. You should look for that book. And Prof, thanks very much for joining us here on PM Express. And what's the title of that book again? I was reading recently, a very thick book, but tells you a lot about the journey of the petroleum sector. Well, what is it called?
It's actually Petroleum Revenue Management in Africa, 10 years of oil and gas in Ghana.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I have it on my shelves. I've been reading the revenue part. So I'm delighted that we can have you join us, because you obviously have studied this. And this year is what, 15th year?
14th.
14th?
Yes.
Okay, so 2010 to 2025.
You mean production?
Production, commercial production.
That's
2010. We started 2010.
2011.
2 weeks in December, so we really would count from 2011.
Okay, so at the end of 2026 is when we hit 15 years?
Yes, so 2011 through to 2026.
Okay. Okay, so that's a landmark then. I mean, we should now be taking stock. If you may, Kojo Safwa Poku is here. Kojo Poku is known as that middle name. Sometimes when people call me, like, who are you talking about? I say Kojo Poku. Okay, yeah, that's him. He's here with me as Executive Director of the Institute for Energy Policies and Research. You know him. He had also run to be president in the NPP too. So he's here with thoughts on the sector. And Richmond Roxy is a spokesperson and head of communications at the Energy Ministry. And I'm delighted to have him because this year, I know his boss has been talking a lot about reviving the upstream sector. If you were the Africa Oil Week, the AOW Energy, a 1.5 billion memorandum of intent was signed between Government of Ghana, ENI, and Vitol. This was part of the government's commitment to try and get investors in and to showcase to the world that we're ready to attract more investors. So I'm happy to get him to see a bit more about what the plan is to revive the sector. But let me start with the PIAC, the head of the PIAC, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. You flagged this, and as I make the point, this is not the first report to flag this. You've been flagging this for the last 5 years.
Yes.
Yes, because the decline has been happening consistently for a 5-year period.
Yes, since 2019.
First of all, explain to me, when you say we are in decline, what do you mean?
All right, so thank you and good evening to cherished viewers. The Public Interest and Accountability Committee is required by Section 56 of the Petroleum Revenue Management Act to publish 2 reports, a semi-annual report covering January to June, and then an annual report covering January to December. The semi-annual report to be published by the 15th of September, the annual report 15th of March of the ensuing year. So in compliance with the Act, the committee published the 2025 semi-annual report last week, the 8th. And amongst the key highlights is the decline. And because it's a mid-year, we would not count it amongst the years yet, where the year would end. But The highest production that the country has had from the 3 producing fields was in 2019, when we had about 71 million barrels. As at the end of 2024, it had declined to 48 million barrels. Mid-year 2025, we made about 18 million barrels. So even if we should multiply that by 2, assuming without admitting that we do just as well as we did in the first half, that would be about 36 million barrels compared to 48 at the end of 2024. So then from 71, 2019, all the way to 36, 2025, that would mean very significant decline. Consider that petroleum revenue across 2011 to 2024 would be about 10% of total government revenue. So if you're looking at this quantum of contribution that this sector makes, then it's critical that this finding and the recommendation that goes with it be taken with the seriousness that goes with it. Key government projects and programs are being funded from petroleum revenue.
Yeah.
And the big...
What did you find to be the reason?
For the decline?
For the decline, yeah. I highlighted one, like inability to attract new investment.
Yes.
Is that the most significant factor?
Well, we would need to understand that petroleum is a finite resource, exhaustible. So as you produce, you would...
You're depleting.
Exactly, you're depleting. So as you deplete, then you would have to replace the fields that are aging. And usually when you discover, you would not be able to get everything from the ground.
Yeah.
So in the best of times and with the usage of the best of technologies and all that you can think of, you're looking at between 35 to 40% of what is actually in the ground up for lifting, and then you get to utilize the revenue. So then when you look at the 3 producing fields in Ghana, Jubilee and 10 are the primarily oil-producing fields.
Yeah.
Sankofa Dinyame is primarily a gas field that produces oil in addition. We have a major issue with 10. That's the Tweneboa Nyira and Tome field. So then we have had to rely very heavily on the Jubilee field. And the Jubilee field, being the first to be discovered, has been producing since 15th December 2010. And if you take the average of 25 to 30 years of the lifespan of an oil field, and you have done about 14 to 15 years of Jubilee, then reasonably you would say that it has had its best of times, and that reasonably you should be seeing the field beginning to decline. But even with the production we are getting from Jubilee, there have been 2 major investments in Jubilee. We had the Greater Jubilee development, which came early on 2013-14, which boosted production. Then last year we had the Jubilee Southeast project come on stream, which also helped to boost production. So that what we mean to say is that, but for these 2 major interventions in the Jubilee field, we would have seen very low numbers from the Jubilee field.
So what you flagged would have been worse than
yes,
what you saw?
It would have been worse. There are very serious technical challenges on the 10 field, which have led to the situation we find ourselves in. 10 is just not giving us the good numbers. So if you take the strength of Jubilee plus the performance of 10 and then the fact that SGN is not primarily an oil-producing field, then what we see as a result is not very, is like the expected results, because from the 3 producing fields. And it is the reason PIAC speaks about the need to add on, because if you rely on Jubilee, it's already aging and it's depleting.
So what you mean is we need more fields to come on stream?
Yes.
We need more wells to come on stream.
Well, we need
more wells, not fields.
We need more wells.
More wells to come on stream.
But then for wells and for if you look at a field already producing, you're looking at Jubilee already producing, then additional work on the same field, you're talking about wells,
Yes.
which would help to boost.
Yeah.
But for a completely new area that would bring us a discovery and then commerciality.
So in other words, and to go to Kojo Poku's point, you're not drilling new wells.
Yes,
You're not drilling new wells.
So
I mean, we have fields, but there's no drilling happening.
that's correct. If
Yeah.
you look at the report, it mentioned the decline in the work rate, the amount of work that is going on our basins.
Okay.
And the more work you do, the higher the probability.
That you may hit gold, I mean, so to speak, I mean, the black gold.
Higher-
But here's the thing. So in terms of the reason for the decline, primarily is what?
Yeah, so because the fields are different in features, it's difficult to just use one reason as the only underlying.
Yeah, I know, but the overarching reason why, as a country,
Depleting
the upstream sector generally.
aging fields because of depletion. Then you have technical challenges on the 10 field, and then the fact that on the SGN field, it's a primarily gas field that is giving you oil.
But for everything else you just said, if you were getting new investments coming in, that would be a
It
problem
would
because
make
definitely,
up.
it would.
Exactly.
That's what depletion is constant. Once you start, the first day you produce the first barrel, you're on your way to depletion.
Sure.
So, I mean, so that is guaranteed. What it is when you have the pipeline of projects coming in and drilling more wells and discovering more wells and producing more wells. So is it fair and accurate to say then that the primary reason why we're where we are is that we are not attracting new investments into the oil and gas sector?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. But Evans, let's also say that when you get new discoveries, between discovery and production,
Yes,
is
it's
some
a lag
amount
time.
of
That's a huge time, yes, of course.
So then some interventions that would at least alleviate the decline on the 3 fields would be looked at before we look at what contributions new discoveries would bring us to improve the situation.
So what interventions then?
So then
Are
we're looking
lacking.
at additional investments in the field that are producing currently. Jubilee Southeast, additional work brought Jubilee Southeast on stream.
But why are the partners there not doing that?
Well, so then it comes to government facilitating. It comes to what the investor gets in return, because for the investor, they are looking at return for what they put in.
Yeah.
So what is in there for me as an investor? What conducive environment is being created for me to encourage me to put in the extra dollar to do the extra work that needs to be done? Don't forget that energy transition has even come in to exacerbate the situation. Now, capital, I mean, for this industry has become even more difficult to find, and everybody is seeking to cash in on what they have before it's too late. So if you don't position yourself well as a country to cash in, then you stand to lose.
Okay, so from where you sit now, we know the problems. Considering that you've been highlighting and warning for the last 5 years, have you seen any, because you say this is really a function of government policy intervention,
Yes.
right? Have you seen any intervention in the last 5 years from government that responds to this threat? Have you seen anything at all?
Well, to the extent that it's yet to yield the fruits.
No, but there must be an intervention.
Okay.
We all know there's a lag time. I mean, oil and gas, it takes time, at least from the time that your POD is approved. You possibly have like 35 months to first oil. So there's a lag time.
Sure.
Government intervention then can sort of kick in and bridge the gap. Have you seen any intervention at all?
Well, so let's start from the licensing round that took place 2018, 2019.
It didn't yield much.
It didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't at all. So at the end of the day, we have come back with the very...
But why didn't it? That's a
speed.
very fascinating point. We invested a lot in that, I remember very clearly.
Yes.
It didn't... Investors were not interested?
Well, some issues were raised. The size of our blocks.
Too small?
Yes, and then the quality of the data we present to the investor. So these are critical issues that at government side, Petroleum Commission, the Ministry of Energy would need to look at. Because then to attract an investor, and a major investor at that, because you know that the big boys bring in a certain level of technology and capital that the small boys may not bring.
Yeah.
So if you want to attract the big boys, to send a signal to the entire world that, hey, we have been able to attract this big boy, and that should be an incentive to you, that should you come, you would be treated well and all that. Then some deliberate and intentional steps must be taken.
Yeah.
So that is with the licensing round. They need to look at the size of our blocks. They need to improve the quality of the data we present to the investor. Then also the posture and then positioning of some government agencies. I would cite the example of the regulator, Petroleum Commission. Even though the regulator is to regulate, the regulator is also an enabler. It's also an enabler. Last year, in October 16th, 17th, PIAC had the occasion to organize a technical consultative workshop where it brought together all stakeholders to discuss this decline and what could be done to arrest it. And one of the major issues that were raised was the role the regulator would have to play.
Was the regulator being an impediment or an enabler?
Well, we have had some investors come and leave.
You've had a super major do.
Yes, we have Exxon come and go, and some others. And some unofficial information that you would get to the effect of us not being an enabler, for lack of a better word. And these are things, let me even cite the example of our relationship with Springfield, the Springfield issue that ended up on international arbitration, unitized, don't unitize, and
that's
all
Springfield
that.
and ENI.
Exactly. So at the end of the day, you look at the relationship between Springfield as an investor and government, represented by the Ministry of Energy, and then you ask yourself as an investor, what message, what signal do I get if I get in from outside?
Okay.
How am I going to
Let me bring my other panelists, but before that, very quickly on this. So if we continue at this rate, by what time, if we don't intervene, will we reach a point where our oil production will completely plateau and would possibly be a non-oil producing country?
Well, plateau, because the fields are at different stages, it will be difficult to talk about plateau for all of them. In a meeting recently that I attended, some engineers from GMPC were saying that even for Jubilee, we plateaued around 2014-15, when production continued at some pace for some time. But then subsequently, but for these interventions, we would have seen a decline. So let's say 2030, between 2030 2035.
If nothing happens, the industry will collapse in essence.
We could be heading for a more dire situation.
Dr. Thea Champon, weigh in for me on this. This warning is pretty dire, as the PIAC has been saying. You look at it, what do you see?
Oh, but we've known about this for the last 10 plus years, right? If you've been following development in the sector, you would know that we had to do a number of things quite drastic and quite differently than we have. So as far back as I recall, 2016-17, some of us started sounding the warning bells that we need to replace, reserves as you deplete. So it's not just about even drilling new wells in the existing fields. That's a given. The companies will do that anyway. But it's really a question of how do you get new investment in to get additional fields, and some of the extra discoveries that we have made, some of them at the time were declared non-commercial, right? And you need to sort of aggregate them to make them or pull them to make them commercial. And I recall very, very vividly in the period between 17 and 21, 22, there was a whole back and forth and all of that. And in most energy conferences that I attended, most of the people that I engage will come and say, hey, Theo, what's going on in your country, right? Reason being that we were sending the wrong signals to the investor community. Issues of tax rates, issues of fourth unitization, a whole manner of things that was going on within the industry. We even courted all manner of companies. At one point, when some of us then in civil society raised issues, I remember vividly, we were even taped, right, in one of our meetings. And then the next day, on the front page of two government-affiliated newspapers, my friends in civil society, they said we were anti-Ghana CSOs. Why? Because we were raising critical issues that needed to be addressed back then. So fast forward down the line, what you see now is really reflective of certain attitudes and certain postures that were taken back then, which has led us down this path. So it is true that the fields have been declining and all of that. That is one part of the story. The other bigger part of the story is that we actually failed to attract major investments into the space. And unfortunately, the pressures of the energy transition and all of that really means that it's going to be a very big uphill battle. Last 2 weeks, I was at Africa Energy Week in Cape Town. All the big boys were around, they were in town, including our minister who was there trying to make a pitch for Ghana. And you could see that the wind has sailed somewhat. Some of the investors have gone next door to Cote d'Ivoire. They are thinking about Namibia. They are thinking about Mozambique. They are thinking about Guyana.
I mean, let's explore that a bit more, this Cote d'Ivoire thing. Why is Cote d'Ivoire more attractive than Ghana? What's happening there?
The same year and I that was in Ghana, with all the back and forth and with some monies and things that they were owed, gas export issues, just decided to pitch camp next door.
And that has a very strong signaling effect, right? So if you were in Ghana and then you move, others then look at it and say something may be wrong with us.
Same basin, so the geology doesn't even change that much, right? Same or similar basin, similar characteristics. The only difference is that one government created room to actually be more encouraging and get the investments that came in. The other government, on the other hand, put in place bottleneck and hindrances that, in a sense, made some of the investors go away. In 2018-19, when we did the first licensing round, I mean, I was around. They did a lot of reports. We even wrote quite a number of reports to it. Since that time, not a single block has been awarded. We got the Aker discovery and then all of those things. To date, it's still sitting there. It's not being developed, to the point that we even went to Parliament on the night, I remember, 24th of December, the night before Christmas, to even amend PAs, petroleum agreements, just to suit one particular investor at the expense of the broader, collective well-being of the state. So I'm just saying that what you see, the decline that you see now, is as a direct consequence of certain policy inactions, policy mistakes, things that have been done in years past. And it's even more difficult now. We can talk solutions. I have some solutions.
Yeah, we'll come to the solutions. We'll come to the solutions.
That can be done. Yeah. But it's important we understand what has happened in the space in the last 10 years. And it's not just an energy transition conversation. It is really fundamentally things that we did ourselves that, in a sense, pushed several investors away.
Yeah, I mean, I know you played a role in drafting the Bawumia Manifesto as far as the energy sector is concerned. And I remember reading that part of the thing you flagged was this too. And you proposed some interventions. And you begin to ask yourself, but if you flagged it for Bawumia to see, then you would have seen the problem too. So what happened there? Everybody's saying in the last 8 years, nothing really happened in the sector. But you possibly would have appreciated You were an insider, possibly. What was
Well,
happening?
my insight is not from this. My insight is far back as 2002. Because bear in mind, Gas Up Oil, which I'm the CEO of, got his PA in 2005. Right? I was the first Ghanaian company aside JoyNews who got Cosmos in. Gas Up Oil also got a PA, in which the first by NDC abrogated. But let's take everybody back. Look, we didn't just get here by ourselves. There is a background to it. Ghana was really not that prolific in terms of oil and gas. President Kufuor, with the PNEC Act 84, it was a bit flexible because that one, the text was there. You negotiate the royalties and all the other physicals that you need to do. So that helped to basically give a bit of carrots to the investor to come in. And that would lead to Cosmos, Tallow, and all these companies to come in and basically sign under the PNDC Law 84. Now, post-discovery, right? We got oil, we got first production, then everybody, media, civil society, general public, oh, we give too much to the investors. They are taking us for a ride. We need to change our laws. Ghana is not gay. We are getting ripped off. Then we went and changed the law into 919. Do you know that post-919, the only PA we've signed is ExxonMobil?
Which we know how it ended up.
Thank you. So all the producing wells, the PAs they have, is under PNC Law 84, the old law. After we went and changed the law, no other company except Exxon have signed onto 919. Now, let's give ourselves the historicals. Most of the companies holding PAs today were signed in 2012, 2013, 2014. I'm even surprised that as per the PIAC report, the minister has given them 6 months extensions in the last March to September. Somebody is holding a petroleum agreement from 2014. 12 years down the line, you are still giving him 6 months to do what? But let's put that aside for a minute. Bear in mind, we went through ITLOS. ITLOS really did not do us justice because when Ghana was the fleshing of when we were really peaking, because at the point we had about 40 petroleum agreements on the desk of GMPC. But when companies have now signed on in 2013, 2014 to do work, ITLOS hit. And where the ITLOS boundaries were being disputed, most companies basically said they have to stop work. ITLOS ended in September 2017. When all the companies had started doing the work, bear in mind, AK had done a POD to the ministry, and they've even gotten Henson to be the FPSO. Then COVID came. So when COVID came for 2 years, really nothing happened in that sector because from 2019, 2020, 2021, the industry was now looking different than what it was. Because bear in mind, in 2015, we signed the Paris Accord Agreement, COP21, then the various COPs that happened, and the boardroom discussion in terms of how much the industry wants to go after hydrocarbon has changed. So then energy transition, climate change took center stage. So yes, for me, I want to look at this thing in threefold. One, I think that there has been a chronicle of events that has affected the industry in Ghana. But mostly is to do with two things that did not help in the last 8 years. Political interference, serious political interference.
In what forms?
In all sorts of forms.
Because
let me give an example.
Clear. I mean,
no, the rules are not. And that brings me to my second point. My second point is the overemphasis on legal interpretation and law instead of business.
Stay on the political interference. I want to understand.
No, it's interlinked. So I'll get to that. My brother talked about the bidding rounds that we did. 3 companies were selected. First EMP, Vitol, and ENI. And I think one other company I can't remember. A committee was formed to negotiate with them. Majority of the people on that committee were lawyers. The head of that committee was a lawyer, our late brother Akuto Ampao, right? He was a lawyer. Now, since 2017 and today, the head of PC have all been lawyers. That field is a business field. It's not a legal field. We tend to pay a lot more emphasis on the law. And anytime you meet and investors come in, we are now pushing the law at them. The political interference I talk about with ICA, as my brother said earlier, we went to Parliament to change the law for ACA to the point that ACA were not subject to Petroleum Commission. The petroleum agreement that ACA had was different from everybody's petroleum agreement. Why? Political interference. Because ACA had certain backing. And to a larger extent, I have heard that the exit of Exxon and some other companies that were looking to come into the company did not like that preferential treatment that was being given to ACA. Because ACA PA, we, the civil society, fought against it. Because ACA has certain things in their PA that even other companies will apply for and they will be declined.
And the third point?
The third point is there. Hold on, you've taken me off. I was going to get to that. No, so it's 3 points: the chronicle of events, the overemphasis on legal and business, and then the political interference. Okay. Those are the 3 points. So for me, if we are here today, like everybody will tell you, my brother made something about the field. There's a difference between a field, the lifespan of a field, and the lifespan of a well. The well has a maximum 8 years. After 8 years, because when they plot the graph, before you drill a well, they plot the graph, maximum 8 years. After 8 years, it starts to decline. So a well has a lifespan of 8 years. On the Jubilee field, they have about 12 producing wells, 8 water injection wells, and 3 gas injection wells. So you can add more areas on the field to your production, and that would increase the number of oil that comes out of the field. What is lacking is companies now coming in to explore new fields. The political interference again, ENI Springfield, right? That should have been resolved easily without their arbitration. Should have been. Even after arbitration, there should have been a resolution to that problem. It was never done. When you're dealing with big boys like with ENI and Vitol, these are big boys. Vitol is one of, that block that everybody talks about ENI is actually a Vitol field. Vitol had a company called Haliconia. Then they now changed into Vitol, and when there was a discovery, they brought ENI. So really and truly, Vitol has been here longer than ENI. So these are not people that you play that kind of politics that we played with them in the last 8 years. And for me, I think that if you're going to that same corridor, and it's not a big corridor, especially where the boardroom is really looking at energy transition, only a few companies have the appetite to invest in hydrocarbon, and Vitol is one of them. We have not really been fair to that company. And since they have the appetite to invest, we should have been able to resolve this Springfield issue easily, quickly, and not get to the point where today it's really, like my brother said earlier, it's giving a bad taste in people's mouth when it comes to Ghana. And you asked why Ivory Coast. Look, there are a few things that companies don't like to see. When you come into a country to get an oil block, you are planned for 10 years because the investment you are making in that block, it will take you 6 to 7 years to at least break even and then start making some money. So you plan. Then a new regime comes in and they think that that is where they want to come and start changing the tax law on you. That is disincentive, a big disincentive. So all these things that GRA did, Ministry of Finance, looking at taxes in the oil sector, right? They've planned, they've invested, they've gone to borrow on a certain numbers. You coming in halfway and introducing new taxes on them is not the right way to do business.
Let me bring in Richmond. Richmond, so how is the ministry dealing with the challenge?
Good evening, Evans. Good evening to my co-panelists. Like my panelists have said, this problem has been in existence since 2019. If we look at reserves, it's been declining since 2019. We're doing about 71.4 million barrels in 2019. As at last year, had declined averagely by about 9% each year. And that is why if you look at the President's manifesto, the NDC manifesto, you look at the energy sector, there was a portion that was dedicated for energy for sustainable development. And in that manifesto, the NDC put in plans or measures to be able to deal with this problem. Fortunately, from the assumption of office by His Excellency the President and my boss, Honorable John Jinapo, steps have been taken to reform the sector, upstream sector to be precise, to signal, give positive signal to investors and to attract the necessary investment in our field. If you look at from January till now, there are times where the president himself has engaged super majors together with the energy minister to ensure that the confidence is restored. What are some of the things that have been done? I've mentioned the engagement by His Excellency and my minister, and that is why you find a lot of oil majors or super majors now looking into our upstream as compared to what we have witnessed in the last 8 years. Beyond that, one of the key interventions that the president tasked the minister to ensure that he achieves is to settle all disputes within the shortest possible time. If you look at this ENI Springfield issue that had been around for about 4 or 5 years, that issue was resolved within the first 4 weeks when Honorable Jinapo took office as minister. And that is one of the reasons why in the last few weeks we found ENI also coming with an additional $1.5 billion in investment. These are fresh investment in our fields. If you look at the disputes with Talu, it's almost resolved, the tax dispute. This had been ongoing for a long time. So the major thing that should happen first is your posturing as government. And that is what some of the panelists were trying to be diplomatic about. Our posturing as a country when it comes to upstream the last 8 years was terrible. And that's propelled a lot of these investors to move out of this country. Some were dragging their feet. They were not willing to invest the needed funds or what we needed in our fields. And that at this point in time, if you speak to every player in the upstream industry, they'll tell you that the signal from government is positive.
And I've also heard the sector minister talk about taking legislation to Parliament to amend the fiscal regime.
In fact, I'll come to the regulatory and fiscal regime. That's the next point.
What is he proposing there?
In fact, as at now, the minister has set up a committee, an upstream committee, to review and advise on our fiscal and regulatory regime. It is true that a lot of these investors have complained about the fiscal regime. And Kojo makes a very important point. If you're an investor and you have your resources, you look left, you have Cote d'Ivoire, you have Guyana, you have Namibia. Practically it's the same oils that you are looking for. At the end of the day, you look at the maximum returns that you can get as an investor. And so if we don't take a step back to look at our fiscals, especially our fiscals, and also reform our regulatory regimes, we will have a lot of these investors go. And that is why the committee has been put in place. Very soon, we'll be expecting the report from the committee. The committee is chaired by very renowned people in the industry, Honorable Kobnadon Kofoma, Minister, and also Asafaje, who is also a renowned person in the industry. We expect that once the report comes, it will guide the government on what to do. Beyond that, you've had Shell come in, you've had Exxon express interest that they're coming back. We've had a lot of these oil major companies coming to express interest in our sector. And so we are confident that we'll turn the sector around. If we look at the vision of the president and also the minister, we've seen some positive signals. If you look at the last few months, we've had new wells drilled. I heard some of your panelists mention that we had ENI has drilled new wells. Talu has also drilled new wells. And then these are positive signals as well. So it's not as if we haven't had it. We've also had declaration of commerciality for ENI when it comes to Ebanakoma, something that there was a PA that was signed in 2016, but within the same period, we didn't have any development. But within this year, we've seen this development as well. Beyond that, we also had an increase in gas supply. If you will recall, not too long ago, we had gas supply increase from 240 million standard cubic feet to about 270 million. Beyond that, we've had new investment from Cosmos. We're expecting $2 billion in investment when it comes to Jubilee Field. So in all, the signals are positive. The signs are looking good. And I'm sure that the decline that we are looking at in the next couple of months, you should be able to witness a positive upward.
Okay, and I'll get my guests to wait. Just a second. Just make a note for me. I need to go for a quick break.
Quickly.
I'll come to you. Make a note for me. I'll come to you.
When we are having a good conversation, and somebody comes and do this kind of politics,
I'll come to you.
It's unfortunate.
I'm going to take a quick break.
We're having a good conversation. Like, he's changed the conversation.
Weigh in on the interventions he just announced.
Quickly.
Stay with me. Thanks for staying with us on this big conversation about the upstream sector, the oil and gas sector in this country. It used to be one of our major earners. It's no more. It's dwindling. It's been dwindling for 5 years. And we're having a conversation about, we've heard from PIAC that if we do not do something about it and this trend continues, by 2030, 2035, we possibly will not have an upstream oil industry sector at all. We possibly would have collapsed. And that is the warning that we need to pay attention to. My guests have been weighing on the various problems, and we've heard from Richmond Roxon. He speaks for the Energy Ministry, and he's touched on the interventions that they are currently putting in place. The most important, I believe, is this proposal that may see a review of our fiscal regime, because it has to be competitive. Because as he himself acknowledged, oil is oil everywhere you find it, and the only difference is what the regime says. Kojo Poku is here with me, and he has some intervention on that.
Please, quickly. We're having such a beautiful conversation. We know that when it comes to the oil and gas, I don't do politics. But the minute Roxon comes in and says certain things that need to be corrected, it needs to be corrected. The Shell thing he mentioned, Shell and Chevron were already talking to PC before the NDC came into power. So it's not anything that NDC has done that has brought Shell into this country. Secondly, that appraisal that was done recently, the discovery was done in the MPP time, right? So let's give credit where credit is due. The discovery was done before NDC came in. The appraisal was done, and appraisal is just basically saying that I've made a discovery, I'm going in there to do a lot more work to see how much oil is in tank, and then you declare commerciality if there's a lot of oil there. So that needs to be put in there. One of the things that I think the ministry should do, and you rightfully said that they've not done, to bring confidence, is the fiscal policies that they've now said they've set up a committee to look at. So for now,
that's a good approach.
It's a good approach, yes, because I think that instead of setting up a committee, they should have just taken the MPP manifesto. Everything is in there. I've already written it there for them to look at.
Richmond, you take his comeback on the point he made.
First point that has to be made is that the P that led to the declaration of commerciality in 2025 is a 2016 P, which they opposed in government. In fact, in opposition at the time in 2016. The records are there for all to see. In fact, they even reported the then government, His Excellency the President, to the Italian Prime Minister when he came to Ghana. So I don't know why he's gets any credit.
There's no PA.
Okay, just a second. Kojo is asking which PA we're talking about that was approved in 2016.
Which PA?
No, the petroleum agreement that led to the declaration of commerciality. Like you mentioned, it's a process. You sign your PA, you go through the process, you do your discovery, eventually you get your declaration of commerciality, you get your POD. They cannot claim any credit out of that process because even that petroleum agreement, they oppose. That's the first point. The second point is that, yes, you may have super oil major companies speak to you. You had Gazprom come into this country, you made all the noise. You had Exxon come into this country, you made all the noise. Where are the companies? Where are their investments? And so if you make the point that companies, Chevron and Shell were speaking to PC already, of course, companies coming in and out every time. But the progress you're making, and at the end of the day, the investment they make is what you look at. So in the past, yes, they've had Gazprom, they've had all these majors talk to the MPP government in the past. But in 8 years, what happened? And that is why we are moving away from there. The government's posturing is get investor confidence. That's the first thing that you need to do. Because if you speak to any major, any super major, even the Ghanaian companies in the upstream, they'll be very frank with you that the upstream sector has been on its knees for some time. And that is not something that Kojo Poku can deny.
Dr. Choi Champon, weighing on that for me, while at that, give me your verdict on the policy proposals and the government proposed approach to dealing with the problem.
No, I think, look, some of the initial signals that we have seen from the ministry or from the government is positive, right? It takes me back to some of the euphoria we had in the 2005, 2007 period after those big sort of early discoveries were made. I watched the minister speak in Cape Town 2 weeks ago, and I thought he set the right tone in terms of sort of trying to position the country for more investment. But and the point also is this: countries continue to attract big ticket investment despite the transition. Just today, as we speak, Egypt is planning, so this is ENI, to spend $5.7 billion to drill 480 new wells, right? Shell has sanctioned a $2 billion shallow water gas project in Nigeria, despite all the big talk and despite all the issues, right? So the point is, what do you have to do to attract some of these investments? And I think there are 5 things that need to be done. Part of which is the fiscal, I'll speak to it, but it needs all to be anchored in a clear, in my view, you need a 3 to 5 year roadmap, right? Some of the things are not going to be done overnight. But on the 5 things, the first thing which both Richmond and Kojo have spoken about is really around the regulatory and the broader, call it, investment environment. What you do to send the correct signals. So, for example, all those issues that we know are major gaps in the regulatory regime, issues with how you award licenses transparently, how you ensure it's accountable, how you tweak the fiscal regime itself. I think that some element of it need to come down. So, for example, the royalty rates that we're used to, my view, it should come drastically down or do some sliding scale or even try some modified production sharing contract that shares the risk appropriately. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think needs to be done is actually on the exploration side of things itself. You need to be able to close all of those big data gaps that we had as far back as 2017, 18 during the first licensing round, that came up. I know they're doing some seismic work. Probably they're still reinterpreting some of the onshore and then some of the additional offshore things. But all these things would have to be repackaged. You get a data room, you go out there on these investment roadshows and get people to actually look at that, and potentially you could get some investment coming in. Number 3, what needs to be done is on asset stewardship, right? So, for example, what do you do to improve the current recovery rates? So we know that, yes, Talo and the likes keep drilling new wells and they do a couple of, acid stimulation here and there. But to what extent is this really driving production efficiency and then extending the late life of fields kind of issues? Because if you don't do that, then eventually you may actually end up having to decommission some of these fields, much earlier. The fourth thing I think needs to be done is really around infrastructure, and that actually ties into the asset stewardship issues, right? So we have a number of very small discoveries people call marginal fields, pockets of them around Jubilee and other places that need to be tied in to, for example, the FPSOs. But you may need a slightly different fiscal regime. You may need a slightly different production philosophy to be able to evacuate those, reserves and produce them for the market. So you would have to even address things of like, they call it in the industry, third-party access to infrastructure issues, right? And to what extent you even allow local players, right, to come in as well. And then the last, or maybe the fifth point I can add in terms of what I think ought to be done is with the bigger supply chain. So this is where some of the local content and other issues come in. Okay, to what extent do we really want to leverage this to drive a bigger industrial output for the country? So we've had things like there was one accelerated oil and gas capacity building program and others in the past. it was literally all over the place, right? It needs to be much more harmonized, and we need to really back the right local players, right, to be able to complement the big boys that would come in.
And Theo, how do you deal with the political interference question?
Oh, you can do it. If you get the right people in there, people who think business and people who think about the industry, you would get the right decisions being made, because you see other jurisdictions making the right decisions. In Guyana, Namibia, I see all these people coming there, and they are ready for business. They're sending the correct sort of signal. So I think the issue of the political interference can easily be addressed. What needs to be made very clear is that there are no sacred cows, right? We don't have any favored partners or entities and all of that, and that the industry is ready to welcome any and everyone who is serious about committing resources to Ghana and helping the country increase its production levels. That is really the only way. Bottom line is the current 3 fields would not sustain us. We need additional fields. We need additional investments.
Yeah, and what was the PIAC proposal?
Well, PIAC proposal, additional investments, as Dr. Theo said.
How do you get that?
So look at the fiscal regime, the regulatory environment.
What are you proposing? Fiscal regime is very broad. There are some key items there that always scares investors, talking about the royalties that you're paying.
Yes, so we've taken part in workshops on looking at the CAPI, we're looking at the royalty, we're looking at the taxes to make it attractive. So it looks like initially you are losing out, but then eventually as you get the investments in, they pay off what you sacrificed in the initial stages. Then PIAC is also talking about repositioning GMPC, because the role of a national oil company is critical in the industry.
When you say repositioning, what do you mean?
Yes, so the level B receipts given to GMPC was reduced by 50%, from 30% of net CAPI to 15%. And if you are strengthening a national company to play
GMPC
a role,
has been wasteful in the past. Why do you want them to give them
that's
more
the
money?
side. So if you look at the recommendation PIAC makes, PIAC speaks about strengthening the governance structure of GMPC and then providing additional resources to it, because GMPC represents the commercial interest of Ghana, and there's no way we would seek to improve the sector without the
but how does that address the declining production?
Yeah, so GMPC holds the national interest in the fields. You're looking at not only the Western Basin, you are looking at even the Voltairean Basin and the work GMPC is doing there. That is even easier to get local investors to even invest.
Are you suggesting that we empower them to become operators themselves?
Well, a whole block has been given to GMPC exclusively. And GMPC has subsidiaries that are supposed to be working, OPCO, and then the others. Yes,
Exploco.
Yes, so if GMPC, and they have been given a field, then the expectation is that, and they themselves, GMPC has said that they will be able to operate
so you say empower GMPC to become an operator?
Empower GMPC, yes, empower GMPC.
I mean, like we don't,
Whether
we don't have the financial muscle to do that.
But there exists a law. In 10 years of discovery, GMPC was supposed to be or stand on their own.
Exactly, but we haven't even moved. That's true.
Well,
you're right. I mean,
that's the law.
That was the original intent, actually, from Nkrumah's time when this whole thing.
Forget it. From 2012, from first production, 10 years on.
But it hasn't materialized.
Well, that's where the problem is.
Yeah, so Evans, do we set aloof
even the
and not do
PNDC
anything
law
about it?
that created GMPC
83.
anticipated one time that
it would be off governance.
Yes, exactly. But it hasn't happened.
Yeah, so then we would need to go and look at the root cause.
Okay.
The PNDC law 64 that formed GMPC.
83 from GMPC. 84 was the Exploration Act.
So envisage GMPC to be independent at some point. Now it is on level B, apart from the equity interest that it holds and what it gets for that. So if GMPC is being given every year, I think it's been giving about 3.2 billion of how much has come of the 11.4 billion, and we are not getting the results. I mean, you look at a national company like Pertamina of Indonesia, and you see what they are doing. GMPC visits Indonesia every now and then. You look at the governance structure of Pertamina, you see one level where you have only professionals. So then they are giving you complete professional advice. Another level where you have government.
I like the way you cite these examples. I mean, so, I was in Malaysia. GMPC was there when we visited the Petronas Towers. We see the magic.
Yes.
It's not magic.
Even Sonangol.
Sonangol. They're doing it right here. And yet we haven't even begun to move that needle at all. I mean, you're talking about even reduction 30% to 15%. We just 3 billion, you said, out of 11 billion over the period.
Yes.
Right? And we haven't done anything. We spent it on, you say, your reports have said, we spent it on CSR initiatives and doling money out. It became a pot to just hive off for political interest. And that is where the problem is. And that is why I come to you. You mentioned the political interference. If you don't fix the problem, we'll be dancing around in circles.
Yes.
How do you tackle that?
We see, and that is why if you look at the Dr. Bawumia manifesto, which MPP ran on, we were very specific, line by line, what we intend to do. Because look, the issue of Esploco now, and that is why when the CAPI was capped for GMPC, nobody's making too much noise on, because really and truly, the entire work is supposed now to be done by Esploco. GMPC is only supposed to basically be a national oil company who has the subsidiaries that's doing work. What they need to do is to be leaner. Today, instead of GMPC moving ahead, they have doing party politics, right? If you go to GMPC today, they have an open NDC caucus in GMPC. That
the MPP had it too.
Whoa, my brother. Let's not. But that's not the point. Is they are doing politics, right? At GMPC.
Could you? That's unfair.
But what do you mean that's not fair? But it's there. He's saying MPP had it, but NDC today there's an open NDC caucus in GMPC, which everybody knows the members. It's going on today.
It's been politicized, and yes, I think that is where the problem is.
That is where the problem lies.
Yes.
Okay. So now there are some good people in GMPC. There are some people that have come out of GMPC. But at every point in time, who do we put there, and how is the person undermined? But the problem is not really with GMPC. The problem is having a blueprint that the industry, the universal industry, will believe.
What are the key bullet points?
For me, the key bullet points will be changing the regime that we have. We now have an EMP, and we propose, as I said, Dr. Bawumia manifesto proposed that we will now shave off the P from the E. So let's do what they do in the mining sector, right? Give people reconnaissance license. It really lets the small guys come in and be able to play in the sector. When you commit people to EMP, the due diligence and all that thing means that they should be able to commit to a production, and you have to now take all that into consideration. If you just give reconnaissance license like they do in Nigeria, it allows a lot of companies to come in and just basically just look around. It helps with the vibrance in the sector. It helps the local content industry. It helps a lot of people seeing that, look, a lot of companies are coming in to do that. Then there is something called ILX. Okay, which is the basically fully implemented infrastructure-led exploration, which allows other companies to piggy off, and Theo mentioned it, right? FPSO was supposed to be a one-off solution to fast-track Jubilee 1 when we first discovered oil in 2007. President Kufuor wanted something done quickly, and FPSO was the quickest way to production. It wasn't meant to be a permanent solution. What was supposed to be a permanent solution was a subsea survey, lay pipelines, tie-ins, and pipe to onshore. So have an onshore facility, which was supposed to now bring in the petrochemical industries that we've always talked about. Today, we still don't have that. So what we might have to do is still do the seabed infrastructure that can tie in these little discoveries, because some discoveries are made, right? You might not be able to put an FPSO, one FPSO that discovery. So this infrastructure-led exploration would help tie in little blocks or marginal fields to bring them into production. The other thing which is very key is everybody have talked about is the fiscal policies. The sliding scale of royalties, the taxation, okay, having certain, look, we tend to now milk off, we are interested in the skin of the cow, right? but the skin of the cow is really not what you need. What you're looking at taxation, really and truly, if somebody produces oil, what the country gets out of it is way more than the taxation that you are looking at. So I think those are the things that we should basically step back on and realize that we got it wrong with 919. We need to amend it and go back to a more flexible to bring in some of these companies.
But thank you very much. And you say that we need to do something urgently. Other than that, you're looking at it by 2030, 2035.
Yes.
We won't have an oil industry.
We won't have. But Evans, let me not leave the studios without talking about
30 seconds.
PIAC funding.
30 seconds.
The PRMA was amended early this year, and PIAC has struggled in 2025. Even the production of this report has gone through challenges.
I thought it's not forcing.
So something urgent needs to be done for PIAC, PIAC funding.
Okay.
But he's your friend.
Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your evening.